Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. If you've ever played a warlock thinking that you'd be roleplaying the protagonist of an H.P. Lovecraft novel, only for your DM to roleplay Cthulhu as your multi-dimensional sugar daddy, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. When I look at the YouTube space that I occupy, I sometimes like to think that I'm the Drake Alarm. Alright boys, it's go time. Wake the f*** up, samurai! We got a city to burn!
Of course. I get a good night's sleep for the first time ever since I quit cigarettes, and you show up to ruin it.
No time to explain, Larry. Put this on. We're going to the Edge Zone.
The Edge Zone?
That's right, little buddy, the Shadowrun Edge Zone. For years, the Shadowrun setting has captured the imaginations of millions through RPGs, video games, novels, and even a trading card game. And now that trading card game is back and ready to run through an exclusive Kickstarter campaign.
Wait, you broke into my house at 3 a.m. to shill for another Kickstarter?
If only it were that simple, little buddy. Shadowrun Edge Zone is back and better than ever, with new updated graphics, artwork, and gameplay features. The re-emergence of such a badass trading card game from the 90s has inspired me to make something of my life. So naturally, I've burned off all of our fingerprints with acid, and over the course of a few days replaced most of our organs with state-of-the-art cyberware. Congratulations, Larry, you're a Shadowrunner now.
What? You've been performing invasive surgery on me? When did that happen?
Don't ask questions you're not prepared to know the answers to. Also, if your left arm starts making toast, just ignore it. Anyways, Edge Zone comes in 2 box sets, the Magic and the Mayhem deck. Each deck comes with 300 cards, each equipped with breathtaking artwork. You can play with one to build a team of specialists, or you can mix and match them to customize your own team of elite runners, each with their own unique sets of gear and skills, so you can take on the fiercest obstacles the 6th world has to offer.
Okay, I still have no idea what a Shadowrunner is, but considering how I've now watched you drive through an orphanage and just found this under the seat, I'm guessing that we're the Mayhem crew. But if we're in charge of mayhem, then who's doing the magic?
Hello, I am the wizard. I do wizard things. Drake, Larry, what's going on? Why are you in cyberpunk cosplay? And why didn't you invite me? No time to explain, wizard. You're now a part of our elite Shadowrunner heist squad. We are the ones who will not bend. The year is 2080. Magic has come back to the world, and with it came orcs, elves, trolls, dwarves, and dragons. Mega corporations rule the skies and seas with iron fists. Most people survive by selling their souls to the megacorps, slaving away for their entire lives just to stay alive. Oh, well, most of that checks out.
Yeah, other than the part where you said the year was 2080, you just described Disney's entire corporate culture.
Alright, we're here. Everyone know what they're doing?
No.
No. Great! Alright, runners, let's get this bread.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
Serious as a heart attack, Larry. Wizard, get inside and secure our place in line. The wait time here is way too long.
So your idea of being a Shadowrunner is kidnapping 2 people at 3 a.m. so you can have company at your stupid fried chicken hangout?
Larry, if I hear you disrespect Chick-fil-A again, we're gonna have problems. The front door is locked.
Locked? How could it be locked? Oh, well, gee, Drake. Maybe it's because it's 3 a.m. on a Sunday? Tell you what, next time you kidnap me at 3 a.m. and forcefully insert advanced cyberware into my body without my knowledge, I'll go ahead and help you keep track of the date and time. How's that sound?
You know, Larry, we could really do without the negativity right now.
Oh, f*** off.
Runners, watch your comm links and contact your fixers. Shadowrun Edge Zone is live on Kickstarter. Go ahead and use the link in the description to cement yourself as a part of the Shadowrun legacy. But before you do that, here's a few pieces of advice. Watch your back, shoot straight, conserve ammo, and never, ever cut a deal with a dragon. I'll see you in the Edge Zone, runners. Well, I guess I replaced my liver with an air fryer for nothing because I didn't even get my damn chicken sandwich.
Oh my god, get over it already!
Well, it looks like I'll have to do without. The story I have for you today stars a player who brings their girlfriend to D&D. But unfortunately for him, he must be playing with clones of Channing Tatum or some shit, cause she tries to cheat on him not once, but twice with members of the same D&D group. Now that's not a girl who belongs to the streets. That's a girl who belongs to the sheets. The character sheets.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Ah, screw you. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from a throwaway account and is titled Player Cheats on Boyfriend with Other Player, Destroys Group. This is a story about how my last TTRPG group fell apart due to players not respecting personal boundaries. I'm using a throwaway account as I know some of the people involved read Reddit and I don't want to incite, or be on the receiving end of, the resulting drama. For ease of reference, the cast is as follows. Me, your dear writer and forever DM, TTRPG fanatic who has been running various systems for 10 plus years, including D&D, Call of Cthulhu, World of Darkness, and Shadowrun. Bard, a close family friend of mine. We've known each other for over 10 years and are still in regular contact after this story. Cleric, a mutual friend of mine, and Bards, who soon became a close friend of mine due to the enthusiasm he displays in D&D. Paladin, another of Bard's friends. Best friend of 3 years to Cleric, and before long, a good friend of mine. Rogue, Paladin's girlfriend, who joins the game later. Used to be a fashion model and is completely new to the world of TTRPGs. Ranger, a friend of Cleric's from work, who joins the game at the same time as Rogue. Our story begins in late 2019. I, a veteran forever DM of multiple game systems, am approached by my longtime friend Bard, asking if I'd like to run a D&D 5th edition game for him and a few of our mutual friends, who have always been interested in D&D but have never had the chance to play. It's been a while since I've had a regular group, so I jumped at the chance, and being able to introduce some of my closest friends to a hobby that's very important to me sounds like an excellent time. Bard hosts our first few games at his house, and I meet and quickly become friends with Cleric and Paladin as they take to the game like naturals, and we spend many hours outside of the game bonding over video games, music, and nerd stuff. The group also includes my best friend of 20 years, playing a gnome wizard, and another one of Bard's friends, playing a drow fighter. Though these two are not relevant to the events to come and are only mentioned for the sake of establishing our original group of 4. As most of the players are new to D&D and I am new to 5th edition, I only ran 3.5, I run the group through Lost Minds of Phandelver and we have a fantastic time overall. Then 2020 rolls around and with it comes the pandemic. Lockdowns begin and we can no longer meet at Bard's house to play in person. This doesn't end up being a problem as I quickly work out how VTTs work, and I set up a Discord so we can play online. Freed from the restriction of having to drive from all over the state to meet up physically, we even end up playing every week as opposed to only having a session every fortnight. Everyone is having a great time and playing TTRPGs keeps us all sane during the pandemic. After a while, Bard, Cleric, and Paladin even become interested in games other than D&D. So I end up running other games in alternating weeks such as Call of Cthulhu and even a bit of Vampire the Masquerade. Everything seems to be going well, and being all friends in real life, our group gels fantastically and has a bare minimum of drama. It's after a few months of playing online that 2 things happen that will spell the eventual doom of the group and the destruction of years-long friendships.
The first is that Cleric begins to talk to a coworker about our adventures, and, excited to try TTRPGs, that coworker asks if he can join us sometime. The second is that Paladin's girlfriend, who has spent the last few months listening to our sexy voices, her words, wants to finally join our game. I've been enjoying my time with the group, and in my mind, more people could only mean more fun times. So I welcome both of these newcomers, and Ranger and Rogue soon become valued members of the group. Sadly, it's here where things start to go wrong, but definitely not in a way I expected. The first red flag shows itself when Rogue asks me for build advice for her character. Being new to the game and wanting to be a helpful DM, I oblige her, and we start talking on Facebook. After a while, the subject of these conversations changes from D&D and other nerd stuff to life in general. I start to value Rogue as a friend, and every now and then we spend hours talking to each other about our lives and problems and just generally being there for each other. Several times, Rogue mentions that it was our sexy voices that got her interested in joining our game. And she says a number of things to me that are borderline creepy, such as asking what I, as a married man, think about polyamorism, or showing me pictures of when she was a model and asking me if I found them attractive. At this point, I feel it's important to specify that I am actually asexual, so the innuendo is lost on me, and I don't really think anything of it until my wife points it out to me. Now, realizing that Rogue is flirting with me and not wanting to lead her on, I tell her that I'm happily married and don't want to come between her and Paladin. And thankfully, our conversations return to normal afterwards. I still value her as a friend, and I think I've nipped a problem in the bud. I put these anomalies out of my mind, and life continues on. The second red flag appears a few months later when I notice Ranger and Rogue flirting with each other in-game. This upsets Paladin a little, as being new to the hobby, he still sometimes has problems separating in-character interactions with out-of-character interactions. I immediately lay down some rules for the group, stating that romancing other player characters is off limits, as not everyone is comfortable with it yet. And both Rogue and Ranger agree to tone things down and soon move on to romancing NPCs instead. It's at this point that the Ranger comes to me to apologize, thinking that he had done something wrong. I tell him that no, nothing is wrong. It's just important sometimes to set boundaries, as not everybody treats the game with the same level of seriousness. He seems to understand this and casually mentions that he has been talking to Rogue outside of the game, getting to know her, and that she thought it would be a fun plotline for their characters. He states that Rogue, being Paladin's girlfriend in real life, shouldn't come into it, and that he and Rogue just wanted to act out a storyline. While I agree with him that Paladin should learn to separate the game from real life, I tell Ranger that I'm erring on the side of caution so that nobody's uncomfortable in the game. He says he understands, and I move on, feeling happy that I've resolved something and kept my group intact. We keep playing for a while, and while there's now a little bit of tension between Paladin and Ranger, it doesn't get to a point that actually disrupts the game. Then suddenly, everything comes to a head in mid-2021. I'm getting ready to begin the next day's session when I receive a message from Paladin. He won't be able to make it to the game and isn't sure when he'll be up to playing again. Sensing that something is obviously wrong, both Cleric and Paladin were the two players in my group who had never missed a session up until that point and looked forward to the game day every week, I asked him what had happened. Paladin tells me that Rogue has just broken up with him, and because she has been seeing someone else. And he is so shocked he couldn't possibly work up the energy to play. I'm not sure what to do, so I just tell him to take all the time he needs, and if he feels up to it, he's welcome to come join us anyway. He thanks me for my offer, but tells me that he'll need some time before he can play a game with Rogue in it, as he doesn't want either of them to bring their out-of-game drama into the game. So, I'm feeling a bit put out by this bombshell, being down a player and being concerned for both Paladin and Rogue, but Bard, Cleric, and Ranger are all still keen to keep playing. So I go ahead and run the weekly session as per normal. It feels rather strange without Paladin there, and I can't help noticing that Rogue and Ranger have started flirting in character again. Paladin isn't there to feel uncomfortable, I figure, so I caution them to remember our rule, but basically leave them to it after a while. being blissfully unaware about everything that's about to go wrong next session. The next week's session comes around, and Cleric and I have spent a lot of time consoling Paladin, eventually convincing him to come and play with us. We make a promise that both he and Rogue will just be civil to each other, and that everyone is just there to play a game. And I recognize now, long after these events, that this was my mistake. By putting these two people together in-game, I was only inviting drama. But at the time, I thought I was just making sure my group ran smoothly and trying to maintain business as usual. Paladin joins in the session, and we're right into a dungeon crawl. There's some slight tension between Paladin and Rogue for the most part. The session is going smoothly, and everyone is enjoying working on the puzzles and sneaking around the monsters that I've carefully placed. Then, for some reason, Ranger starts acting extremely competitive, trying to one-up everything Paladin's character does, and constantly belittling his decisions both in and out of character. He starts bragging about how he's dealt more damage than Paladin this session, or how he and Rogue work much better as a team than Paladin and Cleric do. This obviously gets to Paladin, who is already in a bad frame of mind and is essentially only there because Cleric and I forced him to be. Sensing some drama brewing, I stop the game and tell Ranger that he's being disruptive, and warn him that if he doesn't stop needling Paladin, I'll end the session and kick him from the group. Suddenly, Rogue loudly exclaims that she doesn't care about Paladin's feelings, and that
He's just acting like a baby.
and that if I was going to kick Ranger, she would also be leaving as well. I'm confused at this point, so I reiterate that attacking each other out of character is not tolerated in my game, and ask why she would be so offended by me telling Ranger to tone it down. That's when Ranger drops the bombshell on all of us. He is Rogue's new boyfriend, and has been dating her for at least a month. This single revelation destroys the entire group in a matter of minutes. Paladin quits in a haze of anger and hatred, humiliated by Rogue and Ranger. Cleric is disgusted with Ranger's behavior, and leaves to support his best friend. Obviously, I have no choice but to end the session, so I disconnect from voice chat and try to figure out how to process this mess. Rogue comes to me, apologizing for Ranger's behavior, but insisting that they
Both did nothing wrong.
I ask her what would make her think that belittling Paladin in such a way right after they broke up was acceptable. Her response is to tell me why they broke up with Paladin in the first place. Apparently, she's polyamorous and saw nothing wrong with dating Ranger while still in a relationship with Paladin. And when Paladin discovered what she'd been doing,
He couldn't accept that I was poly.
and so she broke up with him. I didn't quite know what to say to this, so I just said that I accepted that she had her reasons, and it was none of my business. My hope was that, given enough time, people would start to cool down and we could move on. As a YouTuber who doesn't show their face and whose only personal contact with their audience comes from their audio narrations, I can relate to being weirded out by the sexy voice thing from a few paragraphs back. But that's a minor little thing compared to this whole fucking mess right here. I'll admit I'm pretty traditional when it comes to relationships, so I'm not even gonna pretend like I can wrap my head around the whole polyamory thing. But I know for a fact that it does not work like this. I mean, relationships are supposed to be built on trust, right? So it's gotta be like an exponential growth kind of thing when you start adding more partners into your romantic life. I don't know, man, I failed math, fucking PEMDAS or something. But what I do know is that polyamory goes by a different name when you decide to do it without telling your partner. It's called being a cheater who doesn't want to deal with the consequences of being a cheater. It's also called being an asshole. But some of OP's actions here point to them either being dense or so hyper-focused on their game that they don't really care about the well-being of their players. Based on their asides, it's obvious that OP recognizes that they've done wrong, so I can definitely respect that. Someone who can own up to their mistakes is always going to be more valuable than someone who tries to justify them. But that doesn't mean we can't use them as a learning experience. OP's first mistake was not going to Paladin immediately after Rogue tried to get with them. Yeah, I know that they didn't want to get between them, but obviously she's on the quest for a dick that doesn't belong to Paladin. So it probably would be the moral thing to go to Paladin in order to save him some time and a heartbreak down the road. Speaking of heartbreak, OP's second and much worse mistake was forcing Paladin to come to D&D with Rogue when it's super obvious he did not want to do so. Basically, this entire part boiled down to, "Listen, bro, I really need you to come back so you can be emasculated in front of an audience by the chick who cucked you and the guy she's cucking you with. Yeah, it might lead to a complete collapse of your mental well-being, but don't you just love the sound of plastic dice being rolled?" Look, D&D is fun, but it's not force your buddy to pretend to be a knight with the sadistic cheater and the scumbag boy toy fun. Hindsight is 20/20. But there's gotta be a point where you know when to kill the game. And just like pissing out a kidney stone, it's not fun for anyone involved if it's a prolonged experience. It's almost uncanny how swiftly the aftermath unfolds and destroys any faint hope of salvaging anything from this mess. Over the course of the next 48 hours, Paladin ends up having a mental breakdown, tries to commit self-die by downing an entire packet of paracetamol, and makes graphic death threats to both Ranger and Rogue that results in him being visited by the police, taken to the hospital to have his stomach pumped, and then committed to the mental ward for a few days. Paladin tells Cleric that he resents him for bringing Ranger into the group, and Cleric, understandably, cuts ties with Paladin due to this, and his quite frankly scary behavior towards Ranger and Rogue after the fact. Ranger feels a little guilty about everything that happened, and offers to keep playing with me, but neither me, Cleric, nor Bard feel up to it. Rogue insists that she did nothing wrong, and that everything was just a ploy on Paladin's part for attention. This all happened about a year ago now. There's a bit more to the story, but this post is long enough as it is, and it mostly seems irrelevant compared to what happened between Paladin, Ranger, and Rogue. I did intend to start a new game with Bard and Cleric and a couple of our other friends, but shortly after all this happened, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. And unfortunately, in the few months that I took to come to terms with it and begin treatment, people fell out of touch, and those who are still around have jobs and commitments. I'm still in contact with Bard, of course, as one of my oldest friends, and I still occasionally talk to Cleric. But Paladin essentially cut off contact with everyone, and out of concern for my health, I never made an attempt to contact Ranger or Rogue again. After a while, I missed DMing, so I put out a call in some Discord and Facebook groups to recruit some players, and I've now been playing with a brand new group for the last 5 months. Sometimes I feel a little sad when I realize that I'm playing with strangers instead of my actual friends, but with every session I come to appreciate these strangers more and more. And on the bright side, the distance created by not knowing everyone personally will ensure the group won't have the same issues. Update. After seeing how much a reaction this story got, I thought I'd post a little update to try and answer some questions, clarify some things, and offer some resolution. First off, I totally understand that there were a number of times in this story where I dropped the ball or didn't handle something in the correct way. Inviting Paladin back into the game, or even allowing Rogue to continue being in the game after the first red flags, are things that I definitely would have done differently in hindsight. I won't offer any excuses other than to say, at the time, I was just happy to have what I thought was a regular group of real friends, who all gelled together, and I honestly underestimated just how problematic these things actually were. During the pandemic, RPGs were essentially the only regular social construct we would have with each other, and trying to keep the group going to maintain that contact was my priority. I also feel like it's important once again to point out that I'm Ace, and I know being Ace is not an excuse for letting obviously manipulative behavior slide, but it does mean that I sometimes don't really recognize the same cues as allosexual people, particularly when it comes to flirting. It tends to go over my head and needs to be pointed out to me. Even then, I don't really recognize the full extent of it. Secondly, I fully understand that Rogue does not in any way represent the poly community. I know poly relationships are built on trust and mutual respect. And while I don't really know anything about the poly community at the time, it became pretty obvious to me later that Rogue was just being an asshole and using poly as an excuse. Finally, I sort of glossed over a lot of what happened at the end due to not wanting to make this post even longer, but I want to clarify that both Cleric and I did immediately check up on Paladin, and tried our very best to apologize for what had happened and to support him. Understandably, he felt very betrayed, and while I don't condone death threats, it's obvious that he was in a very bad place at the time. These days, I do occasionally check in from Paladin, and the last I heard from him, he has found a new girlfriend who cares about him and seems to be happy. Though, understandably, he doesn't want to ever touch a TTRPG again. I haven't personally spoken to either Ranger or Rogue, though from what I understand, mostly from Cleric as he still talks to Ranger, they're still together, but are going through a bit of a rough patch. Apparently, several months into their relationship, Rogue started seeing someone else behind Ranger's back. And when he found out, she threatened to leave him unless he accepted her for who she is. And he ended up begrudgingly consenting to the situation. End of story. Oh, I am shocked. Shocked, I tell you. I could have never expected that Ranger would be forced to watch his woman have sex with other men. It's almost as if she's willing to cheat with you, she's willing to cheat on you. Well, at least it's a happy ending for our Ranger friend here. Maybe if he's a good boy, Rogue will find him a leash that will match his belt. In case you haven't figured it out, I harbor a special pit in my hatred gland specifically for cheaters. It's the worst thing you could do to someone in the context of a relationship. And the fact that Rogue is going out of her way to dangle her infidelity over her multiple partners' heads as some kind of sick form of entertainment is just icing on the see you in hell cake. Making someone fear for their life via death threats is never okay though. So I'm gonna be tossing a little bit less pity points in Paladin's direction. If this were an Am I the Asshole post, I would definitely give it the everyone sucks here rating. OP for valuing his game over his friend, Paladin for the death threats, Ranger for being a dick and a simp, and Rogue for almost being a sentient hemorrhoid. I say almost because at least with a hemorrhoid, I know it's only going to be my hemorrhoid. Now before we go, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Geary the Red Oni, and depicts the climactic conclusion to a duo of adventurers' quest for my cringe horde. The livestream of him painting this guy is available on his channel. I definitely recommend heading over there and checking it out and subscribing if you feel inclined. As for the painting, I love the way I look like I'm just waking up from a wild bender to find these two randos in my house.
Alright, Bucket Knight, be very quiet. If we want any of this monster's horde, we need to make sure he doesn't wake up. Right, stealthy as the night. Who knows what this demon might have in store for us if he were to wake? What was it? Oh, you're the DoorDash guys? Sweet. You guys go ahead and leave the burritos over there next to that Mike's Hard Lemonade. Bags of cocaine. Take one of each as a tip and f*** off. So, we're gonna kill him, right? Definitely. Thank you again, Geary the Red Oni, for submitting your art. If you'd like to see your artwork featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.